From the air, this island looks like paradise. But beneath its beauty was one of the largest sex trafficking rings in modern history.
The memory I'll take away from today that I will never forget until the rest of my, for the rest of my life, was hearing Ghislaine walk into court with the chains. I just heard the clinking, clink, clink, clink of chains. And that was a very somber but liberating moment for me, because there's no more games.
For many victims, that sound meant accountability. But the real question is, why did it take so long?
They were recruited by someone who was adept at finding girls that would be willing to, go to a house for a few $100s, and as it started out, give a man a back rub, but many cases it turned into something far worse than that, elevated to a crime, and a serious crime.
It didn't begin with violence. It began quietly, with a massage, with a promise of money, with the suggestion that this was normal.
They came from fairly disadvantaged backgrounds. There was some dysfunction in their families. The lure of a lot of money was more than they were able to resist.
I was a very happy child for quite a while. I had a normal childhood for quite a while. I loved riding horses. I loved climbing trees. Because I had brothers, I thought I was probably a tomboy more than I was a princess. Until I was 7, and then that's the first time that I encountered sexual abuse. The feeling of having no control in my life, all the power taken away, I then started to rebel. So my parents didn't know how to handle me. They sent me to California. I loved working at Mar-a-Lago. It made sense to me for the first time in my life. I never knew what I wanted to do or who I wanted to be, and it was so beautiful, it was so serene, it was so calm. For the first time in my life, I knew what I wanted to do, and I was approached by a very proper speaking English lady named Ghislaine Maxwell. She said, I've got a person that I know who's actually looking for a traveling masseuse. And, like she made it sound like it was a dream come true, and it wasn't. And I ran over to the tennis courts where my dad was working, and I was so excited. I said, Dad, you're not gonna believe what just happened. This really awesome lady just came up to me and offered me a job. I have to go for an interview tonight. Can you drop me off? And so my dad and I knock on the door, and Ghislaine Maxwell answers. As a mom, I would have just told that girl to run, but I didn't, and I pleaded to the kinder side of human nature, and that's not what they were. They were not about that. They were after abusing me, and the abuse started almost instantly.
The sheer volume of girls, the frequency, sometimes several or many in the same day, the age of the girls. In some cases, there were victims that didn't know each other, had never met each other, but they had basically the same story.
You're talking about hundreds of children all over the world.
We definitely received substantial evidence that he was involved in trafficking young women and children to the Virgin Islands for a very long period of time through our airport, through his private jet. And then he would, by helicopter or sometimes boat, would then transport them over to Little St. James. These young girls and women were subject to sexual assault, sexual exploitation, through coercion, false imprisonment, where the passports at some points were taken away. Once you get on that island, how do you get off? It's not like a person who's on the island can just say, okay, I'm going to swim to St. Thomas. They can't do that. It's not like a person who's there and needs help that they can sneak away and run outside and flag down a vehicle or flag down a police car or run to the nearest police station like they might be able to do on St. Thomas, on the main island. The island is isolated. So that kind of isolation is really what you have to look at when you start to think, how could this have happened for so long?
If the FBI and the governmental institutions listened to Maria Farm in 1996, I wouldn't have been raped. Liz Stein, the other survivor, I was 10 years old when she was being trafficked. I was 10. I'm now 37. I was 10 when she was being raped. Why has it taken this long to get one conviction? And who is responsible behind that? Who are the people covering for these traffickers? Because this was an international sex trafficking ring that trafficked hundreds of children and young women into the thousands.
How did the criminal justice system fail these girls in such a significant way? How has that happened?
Epstein hired somebody that would impress the state attorney, Barry Krischer, to drop the investigation.
A few things happened in this case that during my law enforcement career I've never seen before. U.S. attorneys here had an indictment and they were sending it back and forth to Jeffrey's lawyers for changes. Never seen anything like that before.
Well, I started getting somewhat of an inclination that this is a situation where somehow, for some reason, the defendant and the government are working together against the victims.
In 2008, Epstein pleaded guilty in Florida and was sentenced to 18 months in jail. But he served just over a year and was permitted to leave custody for up to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week under a work release program. Many later described the deal extraordinarily lenient.
13 months. For as many girls as I know he's abused, it's just a downright disgrace.